Ambassador Manjeev Puri, former senior diplomat, joining us live from Delhi on this big story. Ambassador Puri, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Now, if you've just taken a note of the report that we just showed, so where do you think this is leading? Now, there's clearly one thing, there's a lot of media scrutiny. And what happened in the presser today, as per the CBC footage, do you think it's really embarrassing? And basically, it has got to do a lot about the credibility of Prime Minister Trudeau out there, because not only lack of credible, evidence, but he seems to have no answers. His team seems to have no answers.
Sakal, thank you very much for having me on your program.
Our pleasure, sir.
I must make a simple point to you. Let us not forget that all the political parties in Canada have come behind Prime Minister Trudeau. In fact, it's not Prime Minister Trudeau. He is, of course, fronting. But it's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Okay.
And so therefore, while I'm very happy that Canadian newspapers are raising this point, asking him for evidence, to the extent it can be shared, asking them pointed questions, and, let this be a testimony of Canadian free speech, etc. And the Prime Minister and the Canadians need to answer it. What I liked was what you said in your report, that Mr. Jagmeet Singh in fact recognize the fact that, Canada's economics interests might just be harmed in terms of a relationship with India. No, let's not forget, India is the 5th largest economy in the world, going to become the 3rd largest. Canadians are active in India in business. Canadian pension funds invest hugely in India. The Indian diaspora plays a two-way bridge on all of this. So Canadian interests are also important. But, I think we also need to recognize that the state in Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, etc., they have their own sort of place there. And in some senses, we need to understand what this is. So while from our perspective, good that the questions are being asked.
No, but there are serious questions. One of the newspapers in the article, in fact, quoting the National Post, they've questioned in a way the very credibility of the Royal Canadian Police, that you're making such huge statements without furnishing any evidence.
So, Sakal, I'm in no position to answer this particular question, but all I can say is I'm not, the National Post is certainly not the mainstream and the #1 newspaper in Canada, which is the Globe and Mail. Now, I'm not dismissing what they're saying. Perhaps they have some evidence, perhaps they have some knowledge, and good that they're asking questions. And that's good as far as we are concerned. Let there be scrutiny in Canada too of what they are alleging. That's particularly important from our perspective, because we've said what we had to say, that, we are not involved. And rightly so, at least someone like me cannot believe that the government of India has anything to do with all of this. But let the Canadians ask the question. That's important, and I'm glad that they are asking the question. That we can jump to conclusions, that may be a little premature.
Right, sir. No, I get your point. It's, what we are discussing is this media scrutiny put forth by the Canadian media, or perhaps certain sections of Canadian media, to the extent that they are literally questioning the leadership or the style of governance, where they have asked questions that, is he actually allowing, and I'm quoting, diaspora politics to unduly influence the foreign policy? I think this is, if this continues consistently, this whole media backlash, this is raising very serious questions about Prime Minister Trudeau's style of functioning / governance by his own media.
Sakal, let's go back to this. At the end of the day, foreign policy is domestic for every country in the world. But having said this, let's go a little further. That Canada prides itself for its openness, its liberal society, its liberal laws. Very good. Then, since Prime Minister Trudeau made certain remarks in the Parliament, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said certain things. Well, let them stand to scrutiny to their own people, let alone putting these questions across to us. Our answers are very much there. So, I like the idea that they are being asked questions. And at the moment, in terms of the first few questions answered, it doesn't seem that there is an answer. But we don't know. It's a bit premature. And one factor, of course, comes out very clearly. In that press conference by the leader of the NDP, where he admitted that Canadian interests may not necessarily be well served. In fact, he noted, if I'm not wrong, that Canadian interests, economic interests in Canada as a G7 country, economic interests matter a lot for that country, would be particularly not well served. So, should all of this have been handled differently? I have no doubt it should have. Governments have various ways and means of handling matters, bringing such matters to the fore, taking the kinds of steps like calling a high commissioner a person of interest, then, the country withdrawing them, these kind of things.
So as a diplomat, in your experience as a diplomat, don't you think this, or perhaps what are your thoughts? This is in extreme bad taste, the way they've handled this situation, pushing the diplomatics or, the whole, the diplomacy at the brink between India and Canada.
Absolutely, Sakal.
The kind of damage it has done.
You're spot on. Look, India and Canada have huge relations. Their relations at the level of the people, their relations at the level of the economy, which are massive even from Canadian perspectives, even though it's a G7 country. These are matters which, supposing they've even come to your light and you know them, you need to handle them with diplomatic finesse. You need to handle them in a manner which doesn't allow the world to raise the questions which are being asked, that you're playing it for domestic politics, you're playing it for your own gains, etc., etc. If that is the case, in any case, it's not good. But if that's not the case, you needed to have handled it well. Look, many issues can arise among countries. There's no doubt about that at all. And India-Canada issues of this particular subject are not new. But there are ways and means of the matter having been raised. And so we go back to what happened a year back. This was not the way in which it should have been raised. And on that, I think we should have absolutely no doubt. So today, as far as I'm concerned, I can't jump to conclusions, but I must say it's good that the Canadians are asking questions of their own government. And maybe we will also be enlightened as a result of that.
Sir, what do you make of a strongly worded MEA response? Just quoting from this as a diplomat, where, India's literally put Canada on mat, calling out to do the administration for providing space, quote unquote, for violent extremists and terrorists. Do you think if this crisis escalates from here on, he will have to do a lot of answering, or perhaps his international standing could be under scanner? He needs to do explaining. He needs to come up with something, Prime Minister, to do.
Sakal, I'm not sure I can reach those kind of conclusions. Now, the response of the Ministry of External Affairs, in my opinion, was spot on, absolutely correct. There is absolutely no question of the government of India, even looking or sounding or in any way, anybody saying that there's a degree of waiver. It can't be. This is not the kinds of things the government of India at all has anything to do with. And we are a country which abides by international rules, which is a law-abiding nation. And so these particular allegations, etc., just don't sit well. And the ministry has rightly responded. Now, of course, in that sense, the ball is in Trudeau's court. But how the world looks at it, look, the world has its own ways of coming to conclusions. I don't want to, on your program, draw attention to media reports that have happened elsewhere. But, that's the nature of this particular game. People will draw their own conclusions. But I'm glad that the Canadians are asking him. Let him answer it. And let's then see what happens.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, for, examining this story with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining.